All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to this talk on adversary simulation. This is what I do every day at the Regent University CyberRange, and I really want to explain that our focus and our motivation is for our attendees to learn all the things. I have a teenager, and he told me that I had to have a meme, so I got learn all the things. Apparently, if I don't have a meme, I'm not in vogue. So who am I? GSE, I've written a couple of fairly well-known books. Yes, the second book is bigger because it's better. I've already had somebody complain that I've triggered their OCD because it's 7 by 10 instead of 6 by 9 and it won't fit in their backpack. And I'm like, well, you know, I'd like to tell you something. There are 3 kinds of people on the internet. And I got this quote from Keith Palmgren, who teaches for the SANS Institute. There are sheep, there are wolves, and there are shepherds. And I really want to encourage you to be a shepherd. And that's what I am. You know, 25 years in IT, been around. I was also an emergency medical technician. I found in information security it is an amazingly high percentage of people who've done fire and EMS. Roughly 11% of SANS instructors have fire and EMS background, including Stephen Northcutt himself. I'm the senior designer, and I will also make an official announcement. We do have 2 more books in the Blue Team Handbook series on the way. Thank you kindly, very much. I appreciate that. And if you have ideas, oh, by the way, I have 3 giveaways, so when we're done for about 5 minutes, as I go through this talk on AdSim, what I'd like is for the first 3 people to stand up and in Reader's Digest mode, share an adversary simulation success story. You guys are going to get the prizes. So it's going to be jackrabbit time at 5 minutes till the end. Right? So our range is set up with 4 classrooms arranged in 5 computer pods, and they can fight each other. We have a whole bunch of stuff, and what I'm going to go through is how we actually do this to pass on and share some good lessons for you guys, how we actually do adversary simulation at the college. And we also focus on one thing. We really focus on after-action report. I get people around the whiteboard, and I make them talk about stuff. And you'd be surprised the amount of learning that you get through. There's some lingo that we have to be compliant with. First thing, Gartner has now produced research within the last 5 to 6 months on BAS, breach and attack simulation. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But we want to think about the red team, the attacker side. The red team is trying to penetrate, trying to go beneath the radar. And then we also have the blue team. They are the defenders. In an adversary simulation exercise, in order to be really successful, you have to know how to play both roles or have the right people playing both roles. And they really have to have some good guidebooks, because the best situations that I've experienced is when you play one role and then you flip-flop to the next role. There's also some other key roles in adversary simulation. You have the purple teaming concept becoming in vogue nowadays, kind of like what threat hunting was in 2011. And then there's also white and green. The white role in an adversary simulation is what I do. They are the arbitrators. They play the role of what's called site personnel. When you think about doing an adversary simulation environment and you're trying to do something, say you're going to come up with an AdSim event at a BSides event or something like that, somebody has to be the expert to represent the organization that is being penetrated. And that's the site personnel role, and that's white. Depending on who you are, you may also have a green role. The green role, at least in the commercial sector, tends to be the person or personas, that word that's plural of person. They are the people who are trying to make sure that you're doing a good job. So they are auditing the white team. So here, if you've never seen a Gartner trough, this is the trough of enlightenment or something, they have a phrase for it. Breach and attack simulation is very much at the innovation level. It is far left. That actually has a value to you folks out there who are interested in adversary simulation. More vendors are going to catch the term. Your Google searching is going to be better. You're going to be able to differentiate folks. There's now an anchor word where we can actually talk about what this phrase means. Okay? So the Gartner definition is tools that allow enterprises to continuously and essentially simulate the full attack cycle including insider threats, lateral movement, data exfiltration against enterprise infrastructure using software agents, virtual machines, and other means. I practiced that just for you. So the whole idea is there are now products available that weren't on the market a few years ago. I mean, I think the oldest company in this space is Safe Breach at something like 3 or 4 years. Compare and contrast that to Microsoft. How long have they been in business? I don't know, 30 years. Compare that to IBM. How long have they been in business? Before I was born, and I'm above 50. Don't want to say too far, I'm above 50. So search terms, you'll be able to get that. And for the over 40 crowd, I had a Dan Aykroyd picture I just had to have in this slide. Adversary simulation, regardless of whether you're doing an exercise at your organization where you have red versus blue with white involved, has to answer critical questions. If you're not answering the questions and you're not going about the process of building an adversary simulation environment or buying a product, either way, you're essentially wasting your time, I think, because you really want to know why you're doing this. And the reason why you have to know why you're doing this is you're going to devote time, energy, and money, and you really want to be achieving a learned behavior outcome in the people who are going to participate. This is not just going and getting a walkthrough of a Vuln-Hub operating system. This is figuring out how we can put something on the network to either make a test or make somebody sharper or better, or make yourself sharper or better, because we're talking about an organized process. So think about why are you even thinking about doing this, either building scenarios or spending money on a product? What is the actual problem you have to solve? I have a list of a number of open source projects out there, and I've spent some really good time with a number of the people who create these open source projects, and I'm going to show you a few of them that actually do this for you, and you can go pretty far down the road without spending anything but a few afternoons. They'd be exciting afternoons because you're going to learn new tools, okay? How is this going to improve your internal security posture? Show of hands, how many of you actually think you have a documented internal security posture? I see one brave soul, and I'm legally blind, so I'm only counting him because the rest of you didn't wave violently. You know, what are you actually testing? And I have to tell you, this point right here that I'm highlighting with my cool Logitech thingy, how are people going to respond to be tested? You can very easily shred people by being a total bad rump and walking all over them and not giving them the chance to detect. I hired 7 people in my MSSP. I made that mistake. I want to be a good shepherd, and I want you to make sure that you guys know that if you're going to do this and you're going to train your internal staff, you really want to make sure you're going to build them up, because then they're going to be the next fleet of shepherds. And don't make the same mistake I did. I actually have chapters and materials in the next book that really talk about some of these key points here. So, you know, think about morale. And the other thing I'll tell you is that a lot of adversary simulation, particularly the commercial products, assume compromise. And I actually sat down with a guy who wanted to use our range for an exercise, and he used the term, oh, we always have a close-in attack posture. And I said, what's a close-in attack posture? Oh, well, we've already compromised the network. I said, wait a minute, how do you know? I mean, I've been doing cyber defense and incident response for a lot of years, and it is not necessarily trivial to attack a network. So I don't think it's a fair assumption that you should assume compromise. There should be an avenue in, because when you actually find the badness on the network, to have a really good outcome, trace it all the way back to figure out how they got in. Don't just look at cleaning up the environment. It's really important to know how the actual compromise occurred in whatever scenario that you devise. There are even more questions that you want to answer. And you see some highlighted text. And I'm going to ask you, what is that phrase? Business? That's a command and response. Business? Okay. And that you're supporting the value? Okay. How many of you, wave your hand violently, understand what the MBA term value chain is? Show of hands. One person, two people. If you really want to be business relevant, understand what it is your corporation or your organization or your university depends on, and figure out how that component can successfully be attacked or how that component can be adversely affected, and train to defend that component. Anybody want to guess why I'm telling you this is so important? Yes, sir. Because without the context of business impact, you cannot prioritize or understand. That's an excellent answer, and I'll tell you the other 50% of that answer is, if you are business relevant, you get funding, time on the books, management cares. And why is that? Because you are protecting what your organization depends on in order to conduct business. Doing an AdSim project in a corporate space just for the sake of doing it and making people sharper is cool. Doing an AdSim that you train 12 people for in your SOC, so the next time really badness happens on that's a technical term, badness happens on the network, your SOC can immediately go and say, we checked all of the order entry and the shipping systems and there's no adverse effect. What can your SOC report to management? Sir, critical business systems are up and uncompromised by this attack. It must be something else. That is a win. There is nothing worse, because I have been there. I have been, if I may use you, I have been in this position. What the? Four-letter words come out, very flowery, and they're discussing their intensity about the fact that their shipping system is down, because that affects their what? Begins with B and ends with onus. So being business relevant and understanding your value chain is really important, because you're in fact defending your company. So anything that you do there is going to really help sharpen your stuff and what you're working on. You have to have a plan. You want to be training and testing for KSAs. KSAs are knowledge, skills, and abilities. This is actually how the FBI interviews. They interview based on knowledge, skills, and abilities, all three dimensions, at least when I applied there, in order to figure out if you're a good candidate for being a special agent or an agent. It's a great way of looking at it because it allows you to focus on what you're going to train on. Do the people have the knowledge that they need in order to successfully attack X? Do the people have the knowledge they need in order to detect trace evidence of an attack? Knowledge is one thing. Taking knowledge and exercising knowledge makes it into a skill. I have a good friend of mine, my brother-in-law. He's a diver. And he said to me, Don, you can't buy skill. And we're looking at all the stuff in the scuba store, and I'm thinking, man, if I got that buoyancy compensator, it would really help me out. And he goes, Don, you can't buy skill. And I'm going to tell you the same thing. You can learn knowledge. You can come here. You can go take the guys who did the workshop at 10 o'clock, the Under the Wire guys. They've got a really cool online lab. You can get all kinds of knowledge there. But until you take that knowledge and apply that as skill, you're not going to be able to really progress, because knowledge is great. Skill is what's going to hold you through to the long run. That's what you really, really want. You also need to understand when you develop a training program what it actually takes. I've done a lot of this. This is not easy when you come and you develop a full scope exercise. So if there's an organization out there, they're the ATD, Association for Talent and Development. They will tell you, and I looked this up recently just to make sure I had the numbers right, based on their thousands of members, depending on what you're actually doing, it takes between 23 and 143 hours of your labor to develop 1 hour of premium content professional delivery. And that's a nationally established metric. So it's not as simple as, hey, let's go get a Kali box and see if we can attack the web server. It takes time to put these things together. It takes time. In order to have a really functioning range, whatever you actually choose to have a range, you have to have a platform. Virtualization is wonderful. Love it. You have to have scenarios. You got AWS with VPCs to protect it is a really good idea, variety of things. You have to have modeled networks. You have to think about the networks that you own, and again, being back to being business relevant, if you understand how porous your DMZ is, anybody, does the idea of DMZ porosity make sense to the group? If you can actually stand up a training environment that is as porous as your production firewall, assuming you can actually get the configuration, they may not want to give it to you. In that case, you have to aid and assist them. That's the kind of environment you want to have. If you have a rock solid, non-porous firewall, it makes it much more difficult for an adversary to get in. If you have an extremely porous firewall, I recently did some consulting for an organization that had 3,008 rules in their firewall. Only 41% of them had fired in the last year. Very difficult to figure that out. After action analysis is probably going to be your primary reporting measurement and metric. Your simulation, your scenario has an information flow. It does. It follows rules. You have to set up your initial session in some reusable manner. Script it out. I'll show you some cool tools to make this stuff script. You have to figure out how you're going to observe people. Be aware and don't be blind to the fact that when you do anything and you observe people's performance, it will have a material effect on how they perform. People who know that they are being observed will behave better, generally, and more conscientiously, and will be paying more attention. It is a well-known fact. Pick up any book on Six Sigma, and you will find the studies and the references for that. So as someone building up adversary simulation and trying to use these tools in an education learning environment, you really want to be aware that people are going to be on their best behavior or best toes or trying really hard. That may not be exactly what you get from a job performance perspective. It's just something to be aware of, right? You have to have record keeping that you meet your objectives. What exactly are we testing for? Could you actually detect these things? Could you find X, Y, Z? And how are you actually going to measure that? CTFD, phenomenal tool. Doesn't take long. I had an intern with hardly any IT experience. I pointed her in the right direction. 4 hours later of actual sweat equity in her time, I have a CTF captured with 20 questions and hints. Great tool. A bit monolithic, but a great tool. Confirm that your trainee solves the case. You as the senior person need to understand, for this particular scenario set, what actually is the solution? Is it identifying a root cause? Is it identifying the artifacts in the run key? Is it restoring the machine to service once a particular decision-making threshold has been reached? What is going to be your success criteria? If you can't identify your success criteria, you don't know how you get supporting objectives in order to get to the people to the success criteria. And you also don't know one other thing. You don't really know how to guide junior people to help them get there. Because remember the point I made earlier, my goal and the goal that I want you guys to take away from me as being shepherds is to help people grow and become better. Because we need to be better because they're kicking rump. I mean, they are. Think about root cause analysis. How many of you have junior people on your team? And if you ask them to do a root cause analysis of why a local file inclusion or web vulnerability was permitted, they could figure that out. And how many of you know what local LFI is? Probably half of you at least, I would expect. But how many of them could go and figure that out from a root cause perspective? This is IT in the game job skills. So when you're thinking about building these things, think about how you're going to get them to the cross of the finish line. Our network works like this. We have 49, 50 operating systems. I can do all kinds of stuff, and I have. I've got tons of scenarios. We have all kinds of things modeled in here. And when you think about building your own adversary simulation network, think about what you actually need. I tell you, email delivery really helps. And it is not the easiest thing to set up. Got to have some kind of email delivery. Got to have workstation networks. Should have a physical network. We have industrial control, multiple firewalls, simulated internet. Think about all the stuff it actually takes to make the internet work. If you want to simulate the internet in your environment, you need root name servers. You need static routing. You need forwarding name servers. You need all that stuff. You need some kind of email delivery. You need, if you want to do email directory and you want to simulate the network, you need MX records, email gateways. There's a serve resource record type for a DKIM option that maybe the mail server that you're going to use isn't even going to work if you haven't even set up all that stuff. So you could have a lot of setup to do to make email work. AWS is the answer. It's just a thought. I could be wrong. Artificial domain build tools. There are many of them. I actually am rather fond of one of them. I wonder if you can tell which one it is. At AutoLab, Automated Lab, Boxster, Detection Lab, and if you really want to kick it up a notch and do LAN WAN stuff, there's a couple of really nice ones out there. GNS3 has over 1 million, or some huge number of millions of users, and there's the Cisco VIRL. Detection Lab is the one that I use. Chris Long created this. I've actually gone back and forth with him over the last 3 months, making little refinements and testing and working with this tool. It's pretty darn cool. Detection Lab is a completely scripted build process, uses Packer and Vagrant, stands up for you a domain controller with a reasonably hardened auditing rule set, a Windows event forwarding server with actual multiple levels of subscriptions, a Windows 10 machine that is highly instrumented with Sysmon and Windows Event Collection and Windows Event Forwarding and detailed tracking, and, get this, a Linux box with Splunk so that you can actually collect all this data. And if that isn't enough, you get OS Query and MITRE's Caldera, and all it takes is 6.5 hours of watching the system run. It is also fully extendable. I've taken Chris's configuration, I've added a third server, and I've added 8 more workstations. So for me, I can take this tool, extend it, add more operating systems to it. I push a button Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, I have a completely fresh environment, well instrumented for the kinds of things that we would want. It is really a great tool to look into for building an automated Windows domain. And you can actually stick your own license keys in the environment if you want to. If you have volume license keys, and you want to make this permanent, you can either license it after the fact or you can build it in. It uses all native Microsoft techniques, you know, where you can actually do the boot floppy business, and it does the unattended setup. It's pretty good stuff. So when you think about this, how do you actually select tools? You know, we have Gibbs rule number 9, always take a knife with you, and what that really means is make sure that you have the right kind of tools. Tools make a lot of difference. There are at least, there are probably more, but these are the ones that I've actually read about, talked to, tinkered with, actually experimented with in my own life. APT Simulator is a batch tool. You've got the Atomic Red Team tool, which is really scriptable, really nice, very well built, maps to the MITRE framework. I've got some slides for BT3. There's a ton of blue team tools, and I want to make a point to you. I put one up in here, this one on the whitelist noise generator. One of the things you really want to be careful about if you're building up an adversary simulation environment is having other traffic. If the only traffic that your security onion box has is your malicious traffic and baseline Windows stuff, it really helps out the blue team defender because he's got, or she's got very little stuff to look at. So it's really important for you to figure out how you can actually go get other stuff to make your range look better. It's important. LogMD is available. I'm really a fan of this. I've actually used LogMD on a number of consulting engagements. It is well worth the price tag of free. And if you want to go for the kit and caboodle, you spend $300. There's also a great site, and I cannot pronounce the guy's last name, but his first name is Chris. I had lunch with him at the SANS event recently, and he's put together a whole package of tools called OpenSOC at opensoc.io. And he's got all of the various components listed out that he puts together and has a flyaway lab environment. So in thinking about what kind of tools you can use from an open source perspective, just checking out the OpenSOC.io website can give you a pretty rich set of tools to help you along the leg of what you would need. The PenTestIT folks have actually keep a running list and a comparison of some of these tools. What I really want you to take away from this list is not who's red and not who's green, But look at the criteria on the left-hand side. The criteria on the left-hand side are saying, these are the various MITRE attack framework techniques that these tools support. That actually guides you in thinking about what does our team really need to understand? How well are we instrumented? Do we in fact have an ability to detect lateral movement? Does our team even understand what lateral movement is? Does our team understand what defensive evasion is? Do we think, can we afford carbon black or titanium? Do we have one of those premium EDR tools? If you are a small shop, some of these things you can't afford. If you're a Fortune 500 company, then you've got lethargy to work through to know what tool you have and to get access to it. But there's all kinds of tools you can be available. Exfiltration. How would you actually detect worm bots? That's a term I just made up for you guys, worm bots. That work for the group? How can you detect if a worm bot is actually using Gmail with file attachments to send your private data out the door? There's actually malicious code that does that. APT Simulator. This is a pretty darn cool tool. I would start here. It's dirt cheap. It's batch. It's designed to have you take pieces apart of it. You can pull one piece out, test and train on one piece, rinse, wash, repeat your virtual machine, snapshot it, use a component, put it back together. Use the whole thing. This guy will actually do local file collection, C2 connections via WMI. It will do malware rat. It'll actually download Mimikatz, although in deference to Eric Conrad, it will not download Mimi dogs. I'm a dad. I have to have a dad joke. I had a teenager meme. I got to have a dad joke. Persistence. There's 3 or 4 different ways that it can establish persistence for you for the low cost of free. Really neat little tool. We actually start in our program with this, and I gave you the web link for it. BT3 in Crypto.io, and I cannot pronounce the gentleman's name. I wish I could. He's got a bunch of YouTube videos to tell you how it worked. You need Kali. It runs on Kali, so you can drop your attack side system and your victim side system out on your network as an ISO. For free, he gives you a number of sample traces, 4 or 5 different C2 mechanisms, a few different hash collision mechanisms that look like real malicious software, and a number of PCAP-based executions. And his price tag to add more components to the mix is like $3 to $5 US. It's really inexpensive what he's built. The guy's going for volume, I swear. It downloads agents. You get the code. You are under control. You get a piece of Python code. Where's Mark Baggett? I know he'll be happy. It's Python code here. These are the ones that are run for free out of the box. By the way, it took me 4 hours, soup to nuts, beginning to end, to read the 42-page manual, fire up the VMs, get everything running, and actually create these slides. 4 hours is all I took to do this. And then I had to go eat lunch or have a snack or something while I did it. Generate the client, give it the profile, stand it up and running, run it. You're now listening on your server. This is designed to look a bit Metasploit-like, so it's a metaphor we're familiar with. On the client side, all you need is the code. So that's a Python executable. Think about what you could do from a training perspective on a Linux box if all you have to do is run some code. So let's think about this. Cron job, shout it out. Cron job, modify a file in a init.d. Add something to a users.bashrc file. Add something to an hourly cron job. What else can you do on a Unix box if you've got the code? Audience participation? SSH root key. Add it to a system utility. Make your own ls command to run this in the background. I mean, since you've got the code, it's pretty open. Not only that, the code actually generates the signature on the wire. So your Security Onion box, I mentioned Security Onion earlier. This is a default rule, gets picked up right out of the box by default. It's available, always works, can pick it up. And then what you want to do from there is train people to click the button and go right into Kibana, at least in the Onion platform, and go look and see. So what I just showed you is an afternoon's worth of work, a couple of virtual machines on your network that you can deploy, some execution code under your control. Your intrusion detection system can pick it up. your analysis system. Anybody in the room, is there anybody here who has not downloaded and installed Security Onion? Anybody? Good. So you guys have all used this. Right-click integration, and I can actually see what's going on. This becomes an analysis opportunity for your junior staff. Poof. What does it look like if you let this guy run overnight? I wouldn't want to know who did that. Some guy might have done that. Don't want to say anything. But this could be a great activity. You drop this off on a Kali box somewhere on an end user segment, on a switch, or a Raspberry Pi. You go ahead and run this activity. Let it run on an IP address on the network. You now have the need to investigate DHCP, investigate the switch, get the MAC address, investigate the CAM table on the switch, assuming you're using Crisco products. Go find the machine, go find the jack. You can actually make this a go hunt down the box exercise. 4 hours. And a Raspberry Pi, what do they cost nowadays? 40 bucks? Am I right? It's 40 bucks for a Raspberry? Oh, you got to buy the little power thingy. 48. Atomic Red Team. I sat down on the phone with these guys. Love this tool. This tool is specifically designed to map up to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. It has code, specifically the numbers against the MITRE ATT&CK techniques. To get the attack framework, to get ART, I asked them, can I call it ART? And they're like, you can call it ART. To get ART to run, you just invoke the command up there, assign it to a variable. They suggest that you use the attack technique so it makes your code flow really nicely and run it. All of the things of how this tool works are all defined in this really, really nice YAML file, so it's fairly well documented down here, including the command. If I have access to the command and I'm doing this, what can I do? It's an extensible, go ahead. What can I do? If I have that easy path of execution right there, and the blue stuff in the upper right-hand corner, and this is actually what it's running down here, I got to use the cool thingy, right? If that's what it takes, what can I do? I can do anything I want, right? How about for the really sophisticated room, go figure out how to do some process hollowing. That's a challenge. I'll see you next year. Commercial products. There's a boatload of commercial products on the space. Lots of things are available in the commercial space. You can spend tons of money on this stuff. Attack IQ, safe breach, in this list of stuff. There's even some stuff for Office 365. They actually have an attack simulator. There are also things that you can use that are not necessarily designed to be adversary simulation, but they can very easily be adapted for adversary simulation. Cobalt Strike, I talked with Raphael Mudge on the phone. He actually called me, and he gave me a number of ideas. He actually has 4 or 5 recipes over the last couple of years posted on the site. You can go use Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike has like a 15 or 20-day trial. You can use the Scythe, folks. Scythe is by Grimm. They're one of our sponsors here. You can come to the Regent CyberRange. You can also get the Breaking Point by Ixia, which has hundreds and hundreds of malicious software protocols, and I think it's well over 2,300. I can't remember the exact number of application protocols. There's a number of things that can be used in this space. If you're going to invest in a breach and attack simulation tool, think about what you actually want to get out of it. How you want to be able to measure, because they're designed to measure how well your tools work. What are you actually going to test? Do you need to test your email capability? Some of the systems are very, very sophisticated in what they will do. Simulate actually has hundreds of attack-oriented payload attachments that what their model is to send it into an email address on your domain, to one email address that flows through all of your protection mechanisms. And they have an opener, and if the opener actually sends an email back with the right identifier, they know which particular attack pattern got through and they can report on that. It's pretty cool stuff. How well do you instrument your tools? I worked in an environment where that nice feature in Windows where it prompts up and says, do you actually want to run this administrative command, UAC? They turned it off. Like, that's not a good idea, but that's the kind of thing you could test. So again, I asked you earlier about your security posture. These tools are really designed to help you assess your security posture and how porous is your perimeter. They take specific approaches. Most of the commercial tools either operate in isolation. You take a similar environment, stand it up on your own segment. You isolate it, you test it. You're using your golden image. They deploy artificial agents. They can also generate malicious traffic on a virtual machine under your control that you dropped off the network. So in case something does happen, it's a pause button in the VMware interface. You can shut that off immediately. You can also use what's called black box multi-vendor or multi-vector, where they deploy a very, very thin agent, and it really functions just like a bot, where you're actually sending command and control from the SaaS service. Also, the vast majority of these things are SaaS-based. So in order to use most of the contemporary BAS tools, breach and attack simulation tools, you have to be connected to the internet in some way. 1,500 distinct attacks, has a huge active community for support. They do not have any C2 capability for these attack IQ folks. However, they have stellar remediation guidance. So if their system actually detects and finds out that we were capable of executing persistence on a Windows machine, here are some things that you could do to protect from that. The Simulate guys, these are they're from a foreign country. I think they're Israeli or something like that. Israeli. So they have a number of features. I thought it would be kind of cool to give you an idea of what this looks like. You pick the tool, the technique, push the button, send it through. You as the operator are in control. Whenever the tool or technique works, it sends a positive act back to the Simulate site, so you get a way of actually scoring it and getting a reporting mechanism. My fave is Scythe by the Grim guys. Complex adversary simulation tool. Scythe actually, not Scythe, Grim, Scythe, whoever, they created this tool to aid and assist in their penetration testing practices because that is a very well understood technique for them nowadays, right? And they created this really neat tool. So they can actually take this tool and do all kinds of different things with it from a red team perspective, and they use it in engagements. And they said, aha, we can actually use this for more learning environments. It supports the attack framework, has mobile, has guides. It has a whole bunch of communication modules. Now, I didn't screenshot the entire screen because when I get that, it gets really small and you can't read it. I just grabbed part of it. So there's a lot more capability modules than the 10 that I have here. But the real neat thing about this particular platform is on the next slide, where you get to put this stuff together in a sequence, in a set of orders, and you can save that configuration out and you can rerun it. So if you're going to build a tool and you want to run different people on your team through different levels, you make the investment one time with how to build your scenario, and then you can actually rerun that scenario later on. You as the operator, because this tool isn't designed to be like an education training tool, it's designed to be an automation and improvement tool. You as the operator will have to keep track. We ran Sally through the exercise, Sally got A, B, and C, right? He works for Scythe, or Grim. Neat stuff. You do need to be aware of Range-Isms. That's a technical term. Remember that agents don't behave like people. If you've been up against a real adversary, an agent will not sleep. An agent does not take time off when World of Warcraft gets released in China. They don't do that. Agents just run. They generate traffic based on whatever schedule you set. Agents don't pivot necessarily. Agents do this one thing. They don't figure out and explore and say, that looks juicy and that looks juicy and I had this list and I know that's the phone server and if I go to the phone. They don't function like a person. They're automated, which is good, but realize that you have just a small limitation in using agents. They also don't read your email. There's a great story of a number of major corporations, don't want to say anybody's name, but when the attackers actually get in, one of the first things they're doing lately is trying to get a hold and find out who the security team is, attach to their credentials, and start reading their Outlook mail. Now that's insidious. And I've actually been in the room personally with people that that's happened to. Agents currently, to my knowledge, cannot read your mail, which is probably a good thing, right? The other thing about agents is you have to be careful is that if you don't generate activity with both network activity and some kind of an on-system trace event, you're only helping your staff learn half of the story. So you could do things that have great Is this real? Is the attack traffic real? Does this really look like our traveling notebook user really has DryDex on the machine or Emote D or anything like that? And you can do that, and that's pretty good. But if you can't do anything on system to find it, you're not really training like you fight. You're only training so far. So some of these things only carry you so far. The other thing is that you do not want to over-instrument your training environment. If you don't have 4688 detail tracking enabled in your global Active Directory in your company's network, you are not helping your blue team if you enable 4688 detail tracking in your training environment, because you're going to teach them to be dependent on something that they don't have in the real world, okay? And that's also something else I've learned, is you really have to be careful. And we are really careful when we explain to people that the environments that we train on in our range have degrees of instrumentation. I think that's important to note. So if you want to do this, think about the capability that you need. Let that simmer in your mind and figure out how you're actually going to exercise it. Figure out what your security posture is, what your value chain is, what you're actually going to do to build things in right order. Also, you really want to think about this right over here. What I'm trying to get across here in this area is ensure that whatever you're doing is repeatable, and the specialized knowledge that it takes for that attack doohickey, that's a technical term, make sure that that's actually written down, because if it depends on you, Fred or Amy, and Fred and Amy aren't here because Fred and Amy went on vacation, and then nobody else can run the scenario for your next junior staff. So make sure that you've written this stuff down. It's important so that you have a repeatable, reusable program. Do a SWOT analysis, okay? It's an MBA term, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. Think about what you own, think about what you don't own. If you don't own DLP and you don't own any capability that can examine data that's leaving your network via email, FTP, or whatever, how can you compensate for that? Do you have a flow auditing capability? Do you have a capability to look and see for your firewall logs if the packet size is actually recorded? If the packet size is actually recorded on the flow events in your firewall, do you have a way of actually getting the list of all of the records that went to Gmail from a particular user so you can actually add up all of those packet sizes and make the decision and find out that user emailed 47 gigabytes of mail over the next 2 days. You got to think about all these things when you think about what you have and what you don't have and what you're trying to test, and you really have to get creative and think about the data that you have available. You're also going to be capable, if you take the MITRE attack framework and you're seeing what you own at given stages, where you can do gap analysis. If you can do gap, and I'm really excited about this, if you can do gap analysis against the MITRE framework and you can clearly say to management that we cannot actually defend these business critical systems because we can't monitor for this kind of stuff, you actually have a really good way of thinking about what you're going to budget for and what your limitations are so that you can actually improve your posture, and then your posture is business relevant because it reflects your value chain. That's a win for you because you're talking in the language that your business leaders really want. How do you measure success? You have to think about your measurement tool. You also have to think about your measurement tool that does not punish the people that you're measuring. I actually have a number of things in my book on this topic. Carson Zimmerman did a great talk. He's the author of the MITRE World-Class SOC book. It's around 300 pages. He did a really good talk at the SOC Summit in New Orleans. Be on the lookout for when that drops on the SANS YouTube channel, because it's well worth your 25 minutes. He talks about toxic metrics in the talk. I can't do it justice to what he talks about, but it's really, really worth it. I have a number of metrics that I've put down with definitions. These are things that you want to try to kind of measure for, right? What is the mean time to detect and then contain? If you want to teach someone who can find an event, validate an event, and then get them to at least articulate on this event, we can do this action to contain it, and we think that that's going to work, is that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 80 minutes because they couldn't even figure out how to research the right thing. And the other thing that you want to think about here is how can you have a mean time to detect and contain that does not adversely affect the business process. So I've got a story. Back in my days at Old Dominion as the ISSO, public institution, I can actually name them, we had a machine that was running some kind of cold fusion app, and that app got hammered. And it had been online for a year and a half, and why it had lived for a year and a half is still amazing to us. But one day it got hammered, and it was hammering the rest of the network. And when I say hammering, I mean it was saturating a 1 gig link to the best of its ability, so much so it was affecting LAN traffic. Okay, that's what it was doing when I say hammering the network. We shut it off immediately because nobody could find it. Nobody knew what it was. And we tried to talk to all the business units. We come to find out this machine is running a web app that was created by a consultant many moons ago, and that web app is specifically for connecting interns with internships in the summer. This event happened in April. Did I or did I not break a business process for a university when I shut the box off in April? How many think yes? How many think no? For those of you listening at home, we had no no's, we had lots of yeses. That's right. The containment action in this case is to determine what is the inbound traffic pattern that that web application uses, permit only that at the actual switch port level because that's the closest to the inbox, and block all other outbound traffic until you can figure it out for the next 48 hours while you try to deal with the case. That is a much better containment action, and the kind of thinking that you want to grow is people figuring that out. Timeline reconstruction. How do you actually measure for timeline, and how do you teach timeline analysis? What are the metrics that you want to be measuring for? The better off you can encourage people to understand metrics and do that, the better off you are. LogMD is a great tool for this kind of stuff. It really helps out in generating analysis sets and helping you do timeline and getting information together. It can also collect a lot of other data in addition to the Windows login events. When you run this tool, not only can you run a baseline today and then compare an output set to a baseline tomorrow, you can also very quickly see the reports that are zero length produce no data, so that's not an issue. The reports that actually have some information have some stuff for me to investigate. So using this tool as a simple automation, even at the free level, can make your people more effective. It's well worth the download look at. If you upgrade to the Pro version, you actually get some really nice add-on capabilities where it really helps to give you an idea of what's occurring in the process tree. So that's something that if you try to teach people how to learn this habit, this tool happens to help you out and learn that. After action reports. You get 5 people together, or excuse me, 6 people. I like to do team of 2. Team of 2 are working. They're working on a case together. You compare notes. How do you actually want to conduct after action? Do you want to have people print stuff out? I have found getting people to talk on the whiteboard works really effectively. I'm a real big fan of an incident response report. How many of you actually read the 30 some odd pages in my book where I talk about IR reports? Good stuff, I hope. So we actually have people write IR reports. And I eat my own dog food in this. I use my own format. I've used this format for 12 years professionally. We actually want your executive summary to score a 95 on Grammarly. That was that pause, right? Because you're all thinking, oh my God, he wants me to write good grammar? Yes. Why is that? The image and the quality of writing by your team will end at the end of the executive summary. Okay, I have done IR reports. I cannot even tell you how many in the professional world. I've been search warranted, I've been subpoenaed, all that kind of stuff at the university. I was involved in employee investigation for half of my career in Fortune 500. People have been hired and fired and sued based on my work. And I'm not saying that to be an arrogant, pompous jerk. I'm telling you that I learned what to do and I learned what makes a difference. What makes a difference is when any consumer of your data reads a well-written, grammatically correct executive summary, they trust you. In the beginning of your establishing a relationship with HR and legal counsel, They will actually pay attention to your incident timeline if you sit and talk with them, because they want to know that you have the chops, that if they take a document and they do a firing action, or they take that document to court, that they have confidence that they are at worst case scenario not going to be embarrassed, but that they will win. They want to know that. We also make sure that you understand how to do root cause analysis, articulate a position even if you make it up about business impact. We want to know that you can understand root cause analysis, and most importantly, well, secondly, we also want to make sure that you got the whole thing down there and writing a CAP. A CAP is a corrective action program. You want to be writing CAPs. Why? CAPs are real world. If you're in a publicly traded company and you find a breach and you find an issue, internal audit is going to want to see a CAP. How much time do we have left? We've got 10 minutes. Good. I got 5 more minutes of material, and then we're going to do the stand-up, tell me a story to get a book or an adapter thingamajig. That's best stories. If I've got some time, you don't need to spend a lot of money. I used to demo all kinds of stuff by using some really simple techniques. You can go to Firehall, you can get all kinds of great lists. You can go to malware domains, pull down some lists. Just, get this stuff, test it out on your system, try to run some of these things from some of the open source tools, build your own scripts, drop it off, put it in the logon shell of a machine, log into a machine, see what it does. You can go a long way in understanding what you can and cannot test for, what your tools do and do not detect, by just using some of the really nice open source tools I pointed you guys to earlier. It also, if you do that effort and you say, we spent a couple of weeks, we did some of these things, we found our stuff didn't detect this and it detected that, and then you want to actually go and buy a BAS tool that's automated, you'll be in a much more knowledgeable position to know if that tool is actually going to help you assess your posture, okay? Think about what you're testing. This, hopefully you guys can read this. This is 2 different dating-oriented websites. Dating is blocked at my house. I have teenage boys. We would much prefer that they did it the old-fashioned way, that they actually met the girl in person. Crazy parents, what am I going to say? So I tested this. Note, I have 2 different behaviors for one dating site and another dating site. The Palo Alto blocked the one on the lower right. Yes, the lower right, they told me it was backwards. But the Palo Alto did not block the one on the upper left. You look and you see the behavior here. This is all the blocked stuff. You see what's going on. Different things are blocked. Some are detected as web browsing. What happens if, and this is what the cool thing looks like. This is all the cool data you can get. All this information for that site. So Palo Alto pretty much understands it. What happens if you do it by another mechanism? You use wget. Wget does not look like a browser. You can actually see that my OpenDNS stopped me, not my PA box. Do not assume that your premium, amazing tool is going to behave the same way in every instance, because here's evidence that says they don't. And I happen to be part of the cult of Palo Alto. I actually own one. I'm a real fan of the tool, but it didn't behave the same way. And I thought this was really relevant for you guys to say even premium tools like this do behave differently based on how they're triggered. Many, many, many ideas you can use for focusing this stuff. We're at 5 minutes, right? All right. So I told you we're going to get some volunteers to stand up for a good red-blue story. Volunteers, first one up, on your feet. For a alpha, if you guys don't want this, I want this. Nobody's volunteering. This is a cool, all right, tell us a story. Stand up and tell us a story. Could you pass that down to him?
Story, did a web app pen test one time on a web app for a client. They did great two-factor authentication for the users. And password, semantic, Trojan. Finding out how the admin site was the one-factor only. Ended up being a 7-digit password to protect that.
Excellent discovery.
The good thing though is it came back a week later and they had enabled two-factor authentication on the admin site. So it was good.
And you improved your security posture. And what happened to you because you did that? You became more business relevant. And it related to your value chain. I'm telling you, this makes a difference. Who's next? Next volunteer. Oh, the scenario what he was describing is they did a pen test against a publicly facing website and all of the users had two-factor authentication, but they discovered that the admin side did not have two-factor authentication. And what was worse, they were allowed to get in with 7-character passwords. So that's incredibly weak. Now, 2 more volunteers, 2 more books. I know the guy who wrote these. They're pretty good.
I'll go with one. So we're doing a red versus blue engagement, and we're using DNS
Which one?
for our C2. I'll pick the big one. And we created our own malware, and we were all happy and excited. It was a lockdown network, and somebody took our malware outside of the network, put it on the internet. So I guess my experience was to make sure that if you're doing that, as much as I like having Outback Steakhouse be my C2, do that in the real world because it'll come back and bite you.
Great story. I love it. Okay, well, last book, volunteer on your feet. You have to wave hi because, you know, I don't see as well as you. Are you guys volunteering over there? No? Trying. Who? One other person. Seriously, one other person. Last book. All right.
Doing an internal pen test and really getting nothing until I actually hit a screen that was just blank. Didn't know whether to do it at different things on the keyboard and just the button without the screen. I hit the space bar and I get a menu of the firewall.
Awesome. Great. So for those of you listening at home, the story was that they were trying to attack a website for a firewall product, and what they found is that all the normal stuff didn't work. It wasn't until they hit the space bar. So that's actually really good lateral thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you for your focus, time, and attention, and I want to encourage you. Remember, there are 3 types of people on the internet: sheep, wolves, and shepherds. Be a shepherd.